Hello, everyone. I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. Well, there are some anniversaries that provide no reason to celebrate, yet are worthy of note. Thus, we acknowledge the second anniversary of the appearance of the Assumption Parish sinkhole. We'll look back tonight at the events and what we've learned. And a couple of suburban politicians, North Shore DA Walter Reed and St. Bernard Parish President David Peralta, might find their electoral careers in a hole. Lately, we have learned more from their private lives. Meanwhile, British Petroleum is asking the courts for relief from a deepening financial hole as lawsuits accumulate. And the Times-Picayune has announced that it will fill the void in its delivery schedule, at least during football season. Our Future Watch segment updates the Canal Street Medical Center, which is rising from the ground. And at the well for us are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. Richard Thompson, reporter, The New Orleans Advocate. Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter. And Katie Moore, investigative reporter and anchor, WWL-TV Channel 4 Eyewitness News. And we're going to go first over to Katie. And you had an interesting piece this week. You interviewed the ex-girlfriend of DA Walter Reed, and she had a lot to say.
She certainly did. She's one of his ex-girlfriends, and they dated on and off for about 10 years. So she's been there for a lot of the recent things that have happened and transpired, both in his campaign life and in his personal life, on and off. So she had a lot of interesting stories to tell us, particularly about how he has been spending his campaign money. And she raises a lot of questions in the story, and that we got beyond what we were able to put on TV, about parties that he's had, about using those campaign dollars for dinners, about a lot of questions that I think a lot of people may say, hey, I don't know if my campaign donation was really meant to go there. Even though it may be perfectly legal, it may be well within campaign finance laws. Is that really what your campaign donations are supposed to go for? Yeah,
because those campaign finance laws are really pretty vague.
They're extremely vague. And it's a huge, somewhat loophole in the law in that you don't really know where all of the money's getting spent. It's pretty much the honor system in terms of politicians. They have to report to the Board of Ethics what they spend and what they take in. And then from there, there's no real way to check whether or not that's all that they're spending their money on and that's all the money that's coming in.
So why did this woman, and her name again is
Claire Urson.
Yeah. Why did she decide that she wanted to do a television interview with you?
That's an interesting question. I think that in a lot of ways she felt like she was protecting herself by doing the interview. As we said in the story, she has been cooperating with the FBI and has been talking to them about some of these things that I just mentioned, his campaign dollars, among other things, that really haven't surfaced yet. But I think that she feels like she's a target because she knows so much about Mr. Reed, and that she felt like if she came out and talked about it, that was a little bit of protection for herself.
One thing that she was quoted saying in the interview was that she signed some of his checks. What was that all about?
Well, she basically said that after one of his most successful fundraisers, which is the one that we've all heard about, that he allegedly paid his son quite a substantial amount of money to either provide liquor or some sort of catering for. It was in 2012. After that fundraiser, a few days later, she says that Mr. Reed invited her over for dinner and said, "Can you write like me?" She said, "Well, I mean, you write all backwards. You're left-handed. I don't know if I can do that. I don't really feel comfortable with this." And he said, "Just do it." And so she did. So she ended up signing what she says was a stack of about 40 checks and signing his name on the back of them. She doesn't know what happened to those checks ultimately. She took a couple of them because she felt like, hey, I kind of feel like I'm being set up for something. She didn't really know what. We don't really know what at this point.
I'm surprised the FBI was okay with her talking. Did she have any
I
parameters there?
Yes, and I think that that's one of the reasons that it took her a while to come out and sort of speak publicly about it. She's been in an article or two by our partners at the New Orleans Advocate. Sarah Pagonis has written a couple of stories with her in it. But I think that was part of the hesitation and why it took her so long to sort of come forward.
Now, Walter Reed has been very critical of the news media, and I could imagine they might thinking, there goes the media again. What difference does it make? What documentation is? This is a woman who was wrong, and then how do you know she's telling the truth?
You don't. I mean, we checked it out as much as we could, as much as any journalist does with any source. I think that we have checked out many, many things that she has provided to us. And everything that she has said turned out to be true. So to me, that says that she's a pretty reliable source in the things that she had to say.
Now, one of the fundraisers, the one that you said that we know the most about, that was the one that was held at the Castine Center.
Yes.
One of the issues there is there's a difference in attendance numbers, right? And then also the amount that was raised. Can you explain that a bit?
Sure, absolutely. On your campaign finance reports, you have to report how much money you took in from ticket sales for fundraisers. So each candidate reports that. I think in this case, it was about $222,000. That may not be completely accurate, but it's at least $200,000. So he reports that amount on his campaign finance forms. The documents that were subpoenaed by the FBI that the Castine Center kept on all of these events that have been held there, they basically do sort of a post-game report for every event that kind of looks at what was the attendance, who were the caterers, how did things go, is there anything that needed to change. Their attendance estimates were about 1,600 people. Mr. Reed's attendance estimates that he provided to us were about 2,400 people. If you do the math on that, that means that there were a significant number of tickets that either he let people in free for, which is possible, but we're talking in the hundreds if you use his numbers. If you use the Castine Center's numbers, it's a couple hundred people that he would have let in free, or those tickets are unaccounted for.
Which his spokesman has said that that he will let people in free, because that's what a politician will do. You're not going to turn people away.
That's what he said.
But how does that make somebody who paid the money for the ticket feel? Anyway, thanks a lot, Katie.
Sure, absolutely.
And now over to you, Richard, and still another politician whose personal life we maybe are learning a little bit too much about these days. Don't want to hear all about it, but we are. And that's Dave Peralta in St. Bernard Parish. And there had been a motion for contempt, but that was pulled back. So tell us what's going on now with that.
So there was during a hearing in state court on Monday, there was a motion that was filed by his now ex-wife to hold him in contempt for their ongoing divorce proceedings. The couple had filed for divorce at the end of last year, and it became finalized about a month ago. And then right before that point, his wife, or his now ex-wife, had filed a motion in court suggesting that President Peralta had broken an agreement reached by attorneys for both sides that they wouldn't contact each other by phone, by email, by any means at all. And with that, she'd filed into the court record about 17 pages of emails, some from addresses that he's used to email reporters in the past, others that were addresses that she contends came from him. And a few of them were to inquire, or seemingly to inquire if they should go forward with the divorce, asking if she still felt the same way. And a few of them, the others in the thread, were a little more harsh, and they threatened to kind of reveal inconsistencies with some of her divorce paperwork, and there was a bit of name calling there. And so she had filed for this contempt hearing to try to determine whether or not he had sent these emails, which there's also a gag order in the case that's been ongoing. So there hasn't been a lot of talk in the press about it back and forth by either side. And on Monday in court, her attorney actually withdrew the motion, but he can still go forward and refile it again at another point. And of course, all of this has been playing out since last fall, when the couple were still married and still living together. In late October, she had accused him of brutally raping her in their home. He has since contended, after months of silence, said that actually, it's not that way, that we had occasionally engaged in rough sex, and this was one of those instances that he says had happened at her request, which of course she has adamantly denied.
Now, he has been indicted, though, is that correct?
He has been indicted. He was indicted in April by a parish grand jury on a charge of sexual battery in connection with this.
Also, his home and office fairly recently was paid a visit.
Right, so there's ultimately 3 separate proceedings right now. There's the divorce proceeding, which has been finalized, though there's this contempt motion that could be refiled again. There's the indictment, the criminal case, in which he has recently pled not guilty to. And then just last week, or the week prior, within the recent weeks, his home and office were searched by investigators with the Attorney General's office. And according to a copy of the search warrant that we obtained, it suggests that investigators believe they may have evidence of witness intimidation, obstruction of justice, and also malfeasance in office.
How are the residents of St. Bernard Parish reacting to this? This is their president, and they're hearing this dirty laundry, and then he's under an indictment. How are they reacting?
Well, I think that, the It's hard to say. I think at different points it's continued to be in the news and very publicly, very bitter divorce for much of a year. So, it's something that they can't really shy away from. I think that at different points, members of the parish council have called on him to resign, although not lately. And so with each kind of court hearing and each instance that comes up, I mean, it's just another reminder for people about what's been going on with his personal life.
And
Also,
his-
the St. Bernard parish population has changed over the years. A lot of people that used to live there live on the North Shore now, and a lot of people that didn't live there before have moved in as you're starting to get more residential development, and people are being attracted back there. So it's kind of a shift in population. And so there are probably some people who really don't know, they're hearing the news, but they don't know the players and the history that well.
And I had asked him at the time when we sat down, and he was very candid for about 2 hours, and he discussed that, his view on it and that they had engaged in this previously. And he said that, some people may find this talk, this candid talk, just offensive, but that other people, it was just something that they did behind closed doors, and that from his view, others may see it that way too.
All right, Richard. Away from the politicians now and over to the University Medical Center and the VA
It's a tough act to
hospital.
follow, Dawn.
It really is a
I'd
tough
rather
act to
steer away
follow.
from that line of conversation. Let's talk about the new hospitals, the Canal Street Hospital Complex, and we'll start with the University Medical System, which is Medical Center, which is what basically is replacing Charity Hospital. There's already a hospital that's been operating for years now, the interim LSU hospital. Currently has 1,950 employees. That hospital will be moving into the UMC, University Medical Center buildings, in May. So, we're within months now, not years anymore. They'll be moving in May. They anticipate the grand opening of that whole center by June 1st. There are 69 positions currently open, and they expect to have more positions rolling as the demand increases. It's a $1.2 billion center. I said, what's the biggest difference from when Charity was operating through this time? It's state-of-the-art facility, not the old hospital that was. It's collaboration between LSU, Tulane, Xavier, UNO. It will be the preeminent teaching hospital. Right now they have 235 beds. They expect that to fluctuate. One of the biggest changes is right now they only have 38 psychiatric beds, and those beds are on the campus at Calhoun Street near Children's Hospital. They will be moving, and they'll have 60 beds at the downtown facility. So there will be some more psychiatric care, and they'll be hiring on that front.
So they're moving entirely from uptown?
Mm-hmm. That part. Then towards the VA, as of this week, there is staff moved into the old Pan Am building on Canal Street, which is the administrative building for the new VA Medical Center. Their buildings get turned over a little more slowly. That process, they should have all the buildings turned over to the VA by the beginning of 2016, although they say they won't be fully operational until the end of 2016, because as they receive the buildings from the contractors, they have to get furniture in there and get equipment in there, and all of that actually takes a while. They do have some mock treatment rooms already set up, so their staff is starting to check out the workflow. They have mock surgery suites set up, and they have, I know Errol is very concerned about this one, they have finally started some work on the Dixie Brewery site. That building will remain. They're shoring it up and re-supporting it now. It will open up as the hospital's research building.
Not only because it's a landmark in Manchester, but
It's been
it
awful
had become
looking.
so blighted.
Right.
It was a hideous
Quite
looking
an
building,
eyesore.
and
So that-
even though it's potentially a very nice looking building.
Right, and it is coming back. I just drove by yesterday. There's structural steel all around it, and they're shoring up that building. Most of it's new construction, almost everywhere. There's the Dixie Brewery that's rehabbed, and also 4 shotgun houses that they'll use as rehabilitation homes and that sort of thing. Otherwise, it's impressive just to drive. If you've if you don't drive in from New Orleans East very often, hop on I-10 and just drive towards downtown and look. It's changing the skyscape of the city a lot.
Or either driving Tulane or Canal, for that matter. It's such a different feel and a different look. If
It
you haven't
is.
been down there for a while, it's a shock to see.
And there are positions available both at the VA and there will be at UMC. For the VA, they say go to usjobs.gov and check out the positions, but they will have a recruitment center opening either by the end of this month or early next month to start their hiring process. Even though the official hospital won't be open until late in 2016, jobs are starting much sooner than that.
Just real quick, will there be ambulatory clinics? Are those going to be opening at the same time as the hospital?
There have been ambulatory clinics. You mean
But the
VA
new
ambulatory?
ones, well, and also the University Medical Center. Do you know, are there going to be any clinics on that? Not sure about that?
I'm not sure about
the
that.
hospital, though, May 2015.
May 2015?
All right, that's great. Errol, Times-Picayune is going to beef up its home delivery a bit.
Well, yeah, for a while at least. In case you're losing track, okay, a few years ago, the Picayune announced it was going to cut down from daily to 3 times a week, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. Then a few days, then it announced, but the rest of the days of the week, we're going to do a thing called TP Street, which is a tabloid newspaper, which is not for home delivery, which is only sold on newsstands. Then they said, well, we're going to call it the Times-Picayune Street, not TP Street. Then they said, well, you know, we really do a Saturday paper. It's the early edition of our Sunday paper. And so they were counting the early Sunday to Saturday. So within all that, okay, it depends. By my way of counting, it's still 3 editions a week that they were doing in terms of home delivery. They announced last week that they're going to bring back 2 editions beginning January 6th. And they were very candid about it, to go pretty much through the football season, which is also the peak shopping season. And so beginning January 6th, there will be...
You mean September 6th?
I'm sorry, September 6th, okay. Saturday and Monday editions that will go on. And of course, we hope the football season ends the day after the Super Bowl for us, but we don't...
We believe that.
Okay,
We
okay.
believe that it will.
And so during the football season, then, there will be those 5 editions of the Picayune that are home delivered. So that's an improvement. And what they're saying is this, of course, is going to help us with advertisers. I mean, this is more of a time of the year when people are interested in newspapers. It certainly shows the economic power of football. But it does, because by bringing back editions on Saturday and Monday, on Saturday you get those day after prep football scores, you get those day of college scores. On Monday, you get something that was sorely missing for a lot of people, and that's day after Saints game. The first year after their change, they did put out a sports extra that day, but last year they didn't do it, and so they've jumped into the football thing. But at the same time, they announced that their Times-Picayune Street, which was tabloid size, that would be, if you're familiar with Gambit, that would be a tabloid size. We'll go back to being what's called broadsheet, which is the size of a regular newspaper. And so the Times-Picayune will be publishing 5 days a week, at least to the end of the football season, looking like a regular full-grown newspaper. And then they said that their e-newsletter is going to get a facelift too, and it's going to be designed to look like their broadsheet newspaper. So look at this new technology, designing a web page to look like a newspaper. Okay. So anyway,
Are they upping their staff for all this?
I don't know. That they didn't say. I mean, but they did. It would seem to me. I mean, if you're doing more coverage, you have to do it. So.
And so these 2 new editions will be home delivered.
Yes.
So there'll be 5
home
during
delivered.
this time is home delivered.
Yeah. Well, the way they put it is that it's free delivery to people that have been subscribing. Mm-hmm. And no one knows for sure what's going on in the world of subscriptions there. They claim, that they've held on to their subscriptions, but there are a lot of signs out there that subscriptions have fallen off, and there are a lot of stories about them giving away subscriptions and not letting people cancel, and guys in Walgreens, I mean, offering premiums and that sort of thing. But, 5 times a week is, I think, a lot of people is better than 3, and so.
There'll be news also.
Oh yeah,
Sports
yeah.
Entertainment in these 2 editions.
Yeah.
Okay,
So.
well, we'll be looking for that. Thanks a lot, Errol. Katie, you have been now for years covering the sinkhole in Assumption Parish, and then we happen to be around the 2-year anniversary date since it first appeared. What's the latest with it now?
It's unbelievable that you're saying that it's years, which is something that I never, and I don't think the people in Bayou Corn in a million years would have thought you would be saying that they've been evacuated under a mandatory evacuation for 2 years now. It was the anniversary last week. Some of the people have decided to settle with Texas Brine and got buyouts for their property. Others, there's a class action lawsuit that was recently settled in federal district court here in New Orleans. So the number of people who are still in limbo is a lot less than it was, a year ago, a year and a half ago. But the size of the sinkhole has just really continued to just balloon.
Okay, so people will understand the cause. There are salt domes throughout that land, and this was a salt dome that a wall collapsed, forcing the sinkhole?
Yes, and they haven't specifically said what the cause was, I think because of all of that litigation, but the Napoleonville Salt Dome is this big salt dome underneath the ground, and it looks like a big dome with like little tentacles. And so those little tentacles, chemical companies need brine for their chemical operations, which essentially is salt water. And so companies will go in and they'll mine out those little fingers within that salt dome and produce brine as they're mining them out. Well, the question is whether or not one of those companies, Texas Brine, got too close to the edge of one of those fingers, and that caused a deep, deep, deep collapse well within the earth of one of those salt caverns. And so it started collapsing underneath, which then essentially caused the sinkhole at the top of the surface. And what is so perplexing to scientists all over the map is, number one, that it's so deep and it's the only one like it in the world that's happened. Secondly, that it still hasn't stabilized. So they don't know when this thing is going to become stable. And the concern, obviously, which no one is predicting at this point, but the concern is that it could threaten the stability of the entire salt dome, which is a huge area in Assumption Parish and could affect a number of communities. Again, no one has speculated that this will get to that point, but that's the fear of a lot of the residents.
Is it continuing to grow, though? And
it is continuing to grow.
And how deep is it?
They don't even really have a specific depth of it. They've done a lot of geo studies underground to try and figure out that answer. But they still don't know specifically. And the state has required Texas Brine to do a lot of those studies, which is good because they're getting a better idea of kind of what the footprint is of it and kind of what the map is like underground.
But it's not growing into sin.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
How many families are out?
A lot. It just depends on when you ask that question. A lot of the families had multiple residences, like this was their sort of retirement community and planning. Bayou Corn is this beautiful little community. I mean, if you picture perfect swamp fishing community, this is where you want to go. It's just gorgeous. The big cypress trees, the Spanish moss, everything. So these people had really sort of invested in making this their retirement home.
You say it's still growing, but is it still growing at the same rate as originally as 2 years ago, or has that slowed down a little?
It's slowed down a little bit. They just don't know, kind of what's going to happen with it. There are increases in seismic activity pretty regularly. Every couple of weeks, they'll see an increase in basically little tremors underground, and they have all these measurement devices that are all around that area to try and pick that up, because every time they sense these tremors, that's when they see another burp, is what they call it. And the sinkhole essentially swallows up some more land and produces more from inside the cavern.
And trees. Last year there was some really dramatic video shown.
Absolutely.
Of whole big cypress trees just being sucked into that hole.
Absolutely. And it's just pretty incredible to think about the fact that it started at 5 acres and now it's just grown to the size that it is. And it's just, I don't think anything that anyone ever expected. And so it's just one of those big unknowns, and it's a scientific anomaly.
Another unknown, over to you, Richard, right now. The BP settlement, they are continuing to challenge in court. Explain to us what's going on with that.
Well, it seems as though ever since 2012, when lawyers for both BP and the plaintiffs who represent individuals and businesses that were harmed by the spill, ever since they agreed to the settlement, it seems like it's been going back and forth to be challenged, both in federal court here and also in the Fifth Circuit. And so what we've seen recently is last week, BP asked the U.S. Supreme Court formally to take a look at the terms of the settlement. And so when both sides agreed to the settlement, basically it stipulated that individuals and businesses located in certain areas along the Gulf, if they could show that they lost money in 2010 but then bounced back in 2011, they were entitled to some kind of support from that. And so what BP is now starting to say, looking back at the settlement, what they're asking the Supreme Court to do is to take a look and show that, in fact, businesses and residents should have to show that the spill directly caused their losses. And so this has already gone before the Fifth Circuit, which was deeply divided on the issue, and now they're trying to turn to the nation's highest court for this.
No, they agreed to this, right? This was first in district court with Judge Barbier, right?
They did. They had a fairness hearing about it here years ago, in federal court before Judge Barbier. Both sides at the time really lauded the deal as a way for BP to try to make good on this, what's widely considered the worst environmental disaster in the country's history. And ever since then, it's really been going back and forth before the courts. And so most experts who have been following it say BP really has kind of a long road ahead of it in order to try to seek any relief from the Supreme Court, which hears maybe about 80 cases out of about 10,000 before at any point.
So it's a long shot. And thus far, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, a 3-judge panel upheld Barbier's ruling.
That's correct, yeah.
And then the full panel refused to hear it again. So now moving on to the Supreme Court. So why has BP done this? Why have they just sort of reversed course from agreeing to this settlement, which they say could reach over $7 billion? Is that the reason why? It's just a little bit more money than they thought?
I mean, it's hard to say. I don't know if they necessarily agree that they've reversed course on it, although it certainly looks like that from the outside. But within this filing, they're suggesting that hundreds of millions of dollars have been paid out to businesses along the coast where they can really maybe show a loss or maybe not at all. And so they're starting to look back at that and say, you know, this isn't what we signed up for.
And so how long now will we be waiting? I mean, and while we're waiting, will settlements be paid out?
Well, they had asked the Supreme Court to halt payments in the meantime while they decide whether or not to hear the case, and they denied doing that. And so in the meantime, payments will continue to be paid out up until this point, but we're still a long way from having any kind of resolution on it.
All right, thanks a lot, Richard. Well, it's time to look ahead. Daryl.
The legislature changed the laws governing forming new corporations to go into effect in January. So the companies that deals with mergers and acquisitions and forming new corporations are bracing up to inform people. What they're saying is that this law will be a lot better and more appetizing for people who want to do business in Louisiana. It's more along the lines of what other states are doing, and they think that in the long run it'll be better for the state. But the laws will change in January.
All right, Richard.
I think the Saints are going to win this weekend. Feeling pretty good about it.
Yeah, that's their only prediction, just for this weekend. What about for the season?
I think the whole season. I think they're going to start strong and finish strong.
I agree with you on that.
Speaking of strong, Jefferson Parish Economic Development Group is helping businesses grow. Startups in Jefferson Parish can learn more once you've started your business, how to grow it. Wednesday, August 20th at 9 o'clock in the morning at the East Bank Regional Library. It's free for businesses, but they do have to register at jedco.org.
Thanks a lot, Don. Katie.
I think this prediction is probably as easy as yours to make, but I think we're going to see a lot more continued heat on Mr. Reed in St. Tammany Parish. I think that we've only scratched the surface of things that are going to be coming from there.
All right. Thanks a lot. Thanks, you guys, for being here with us this evening, and thank you for joining us. And, of course, we want to see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.